They did say his name and were pleading for their life. Don't shoot me, don't shoot me, don't do it.
Good evening, everyone. It was a massacre with employees scattered like flies.
And then there was another shot, and the guy that was working in the case in front of me, he turned around and he said, "Oh my God, get out of here."
As I stopped, he came around the corner with his gun raised, and I ducked down, and he shot another carrier.
But I kicked it out of his hand. Well, he picked it up and put another clip in it.
Many are also beginning to realize that the senseless slaughter was not their fault.
That's the way one eyewitness described today's shooting rampage.
Post office shootings refer to violent incidents that have occurred in U.S. postal facilities, notably escalating during the 1980s. 45-year-old Patrick Sherrill arrived at work in uniform like any ordinary day. Even so, August 20th, 1986 was anything but ordinary. At the time, it was the state's largest and the nation's third largest mass murder in a single incident. Alongside similar acts of violence by postal workers, it gave rise to the American phrase, going postal. Patrick Henry Sherrill was born August 13, 1941, to parents Charles and Anna Sherrill. Alongside him and two parents was his older brother Charles, named after their father. He grew up in the small rural town of Watonga, Oklahoma, a place known for its quiet agricultural atmosphere and with a population of only a few thousand people. There exists very little information regarding Sherrill's childhood. What is known is that he had a fairly isolated and troubling upbringing. The people who lived around Sherrill struggled to describe him in the same way, but they often arrived at the same words: loner, strange, weird. Neighbors and coworkers repeated these descriptions again and again as they tried to explain the man responsible for the massacre. He served in the United States Marine Corps for nearly 3 years, which began in January 1964 and concluded December 1966. During his 2 years of service, he received professional training in small arms with the Oklahoma Air National Guard. He spent time as an electronics technician for Oklahoma City and later worked in the stockroom of a local American Cancer Society office. Sherrill had no official diagnosis or documented mental health, but he reportedly feared developing the same mental illness he believed affected his father. Yet, there were moments that hinted at growing instability. While working at a radio store, Sherrill reportedly quit after the owner referred to him as that young man while directing a customer to him. According to a coworker, Sherrill interrupted to say that he had a name and that it was Pat Sherrill before leaving the store without another word. His interest in amateur radio never translated into friendships. Other operators recalled that he was not well liked within the local ham radio community and remained distant from those around him. A local pastor urged him to seek therapy, but he refused, insisting he did not need professional help, effectively closing the door on an intervention. Sherrill began employment as a relief carrier for the post office 16 months before the massacre. His duties required him to drive different routes on different days, changing patterns that never settled into a routine. Because his position lacked permanent placement, he also lacked job stability, unlike other postal workers. Opinions on Sherrill's work ethic varied. Some said he was erratic and difficult to work with, while others stated that he performed well and was often badgered by management who would watch him closer than they would others. On the afternoon of August 19th, Supervisors Esser and Bland pulled Sherrill aside to confront him regarding his work performance. Sherrill was offended by this and threatened to take revenge. A coworker recalls things he said in the break room that day before leaving work.
Last week we were in the break room. He says that they were going to be sorry. I said, "Oh, come on, Patrick, we know you're having trouble with management." And he says, "Oh, they'll be sorry and everybody will know about it." Now, what do you think when someone says something like that?
On the day of the massacre, Cheryl came prepared. He carried with him 3 semi-automatic pistols and extra ammunition hidden inside his mailbag. Once he was inside, the building was sealed, locking the doors as if to ensure no one would escape what he had set in motion. Later witnesses would describe him as calm and expressionless when he first began the attack. His first target was Richard Esser Jr., one of the supervisors who had confronted him the day prior. He killed him without hesitation. Then he went looking for Bill Bland. Bland had overslept, arriving an hour later, unknowingly spared by sheer chance. By then, the violence had already run its course within the facility. Unable to locate him, Cheryl turned his attention elsewhere, killing Paul Michael Rockney, a co-worker and grandson of the well-known football coach Newt Rockney, before moving through the building in search of more victims. At 7:05 a.m., a witness named Warren Friday, who lived just a mere house down from the post office, saw people spilling out of the building. At first he thought they were joggers, until he recognized the uniforms and saw their panic. One survivor ran toward him, breathless, and ordering him to call 911, telling him there had been a shooting. With this information, Friday rushed inside his home and called the Edmond police. To those who had known him for years, the change seemed gradual. After returning home from the Marine Corps, Cheryl developed an intense interest in guns, live ammunition, and military clothing that he had brought back with him. Children in the neighborhood remembered seeing him regularly dressed in army fatigues. In those early years, he could still appear approachable. He once invited the neighborhood kids into his backyard to play baseball, but according to those who remember it, it only happened once. After that, they said he kept to himself, as his behavior became increasingly difficult to comprehend. The children eventually gave him nicknames like Fat Pat and Crazy Pat. They claimed to have seen him wandering through the neighborhood late at night, cutting across lawns and looking into windows of nearby homes. Other residents remembered the same thing, saying he would walk the streets at all hours before stopping to silently stare at people during the day. On paper, there were few obvious warning signs. His military service records showed no major disciplinary problems, and later employers described his work as satisfactory. At the time of the attack, nearly 100 workers occupied the building, all unaware of what was unfolding around them. Cheryl moved through methodically, killing 14 people and wounding 6 others in his wake. The horrifying events of August 20th, 1986 came to a halt only when he turned the gun on himself, firing a single shot into his head before police could get to him. While police searched his White House after the shooting, they found large amounts of ammunition inside. For the people who lived nearby, it was not unexpected. Neighbors said firearms, ammunition, and even grenades had been a familiar presence in the home for years. Several people became outspoken public voices after the massacre. Those individuals were survivors, family members, union representatives, and local officials. One of the most prominent figures is Steve Brem. He later testified before Congress about the emotional aftermath and criticized postal management for how survivors were treated after the shooting. He stated survivors felt they were under emotional attack from management, even after the massacre. In the years that followed, those who studied him did not find madness. They found something more chilling. A man steeped in narcissism and fixation, not broken, but mended. Not detached from the reality that he lived in, but disturbingly anchored in it. After this unforeseen tragedy, the Edmond Post Office is still in operation and still functions as a USPS facility, and at the same address of 200 North Broadway in Edmond, Oklahoma. However, security and workplace policies have changed significantly. On May 29, 1989, a memorial statue was dedicated to the victims and survivors of that fateful day. It depicts a man and a woman standing side by side, holding a yellow ribbon that slips from their hands and falls toward the ground, ending in a bow at their feet. A haunting reminder of lives abruptly severed, dreams unfinished, futures stolen, and many families forever changed by a tragedy that left wounds time never could fully heal. There was something deeply unsettling about the night Randy Sellers disappeared. After an altercation had occurred at the local state fair and being dropped off a mere mile from his home by 2 police officers, the 17-year-old vanished. No one knows for certain or has a clear answer of what happened to Randy that night. Or do they? Randy Lee Sellers was born September 6, 1962. After he graduated high school, his plans were to become an iron worker like his stepfather, to whom he was close with. On August 16, 1980, something happened. Sellers would vanish 2 weeks before his 18th birthday. Just a day prior, Randy got permission to attend the Kenton County State Fair. He and a group of friends set off to have fun and enjoy the last month of summer that year. That evening, Sellers drank heavily with friends and also smoked marijuana. At some point, witnesses called the police on the group after Sellers got into a fist fight with an unknown stranger at the fair. When officers arrived, the fight had already ended. Sellers was charged with public intoxication and disorderly conduct due to the fight he was involved in. It's unclear where Sellers' group wandered off to when the 2 officers arrived, but they were nowhere to be found and the officers did not go looking for them. There has been debate as to what happened to Sellers that evening. The 2 officers, later identified as Sergeant Robert Wenner and Officer Jay Safride, have said they made the decision to give him a ride home since they discovered him to be a minor. He was let out of the police car after reportedly refusing to provide his home address. Sellers was dropped off at a railway overpass and has never been seen or heard from by anyone. His parents, Wanda and John Cotton, noticed that Randy had not come home, but they were not immediately alarmed. They assumed he was simply out late and would eventually return. Tragically, they were wrong. The Cottons would only learn about Randy's contact with police after the fact. A search for the missing teenager began on August 17, 1980. One of the earliest investigative steps was dragging the Licking River. Authorities feared he may have fallen in and drowned. During the investigation, at least one independent eyewitness came forward and reported seeing Sellers staggering down the road, with 2 police vehicles parked nearby shortly after he was taken into custody. The 2 officers quickly became central figures in the investigation because they were the last known people to see Randy alive. Over time, police discovered inconsistencies in their accounts. Officers Wenner and Safride reportedly gave conflicting information regarding the exact location where Randy was released, the time he was released, how intoxicated he was, and the sequence of events during the ride home. Reserve Officer Robert Wenner initially put the 17-year-old in his squad car to take him home from the Kenton County State Fair. As they neared the Visalia, Kentucky area, the officer claimed that Sellers suddenly attacked him by striking him in the head and choking him. Wenner called for backup, leading full-time officer Jay Safride to arrive in a second cruiser. Randy was then transferred from Wenner's vehicle to Safride's patrol car. Officer Safride then drove forward with Officer Wenner following closely behind him in his own cruiser. After Randy refused to point out his exact house, both patrol cars pulled over to the railway overpass and the officers let him out of the vehicle. Years later, during renewed questioning, one officer reportedly stated that the other officer had struck Randy. According to investigators, after making the statement, he quickly attempted to recant his statement. A detective later described the officer as becoming emotionally distressed after the admission. One of the biggest developments came roughly a decade after Randy disappeared. Serial killer, neo-Nazi, and rapist Donald Leroy Evans claimed he had picked Randy up while he was staggering in the roadway after being dropped off by police. Evans said the handsome boy got in willingly and appeared drunk. The 2 headed toward Kincaid Lake State Park. It was there that Evans claimed to have shot Randy in the back of the head and proceeded to bury him in a shallow grave within the park grounds. Evans drew investigators a map showing where the grave was located. In 1994, authorities searched the area drawn by Evans on the map, but found nothing. Investigators remained divided because Evans had made numerous confessions, though some aspects of his story appeared plausible. Whether Evans was truly responsible for Sellers' disappearance may never be known. He would later be stabbed to death by fellow inmate Jimmy Mack at the Mississippi State Penitentiary on January 5, 1999. At the time, Evans was on death row for the kidnapping, rape, and murder of 10-year-old Beatrice Louise Ruth. It was alleged after receiving a chilling tip in the early 2000s suggesting Randy might be buried on the property associated with one of the officers, which led increased scrutiny of the officer's involvement, though no public evidence has ever been released proving they were responsible for his disappearance.
Hi guys, well the search area is focused in the woods behind this building here. Crews just wrapped up in the last half hour or so for the day, but the search will continue tomorrow morning. And you mentioned it's about a 40-year-old cold case, but the new information that prompted this effort was only discovered in the last year or so.
It is tricky to find, but it's possible to find.
Searchers are combing through the dirt at Kincaid State Park in Kentucky, looking for any signs of Randy Sellers.
Out there, we're searching a new area. This could be it.
Expanding their search, these Townsend University students are sifting, digging for clues to find Randy Sellers.
Look for bones, or we could look for, we were looking for maybe keys or an ID that was buried. We are hoping that we find something to bring back to the family. I cannot imagine what they went through in the past 39 years.
Now park rangers realized the map could have been read upside down, so they brought in these guys.
They had found some new hot spots, so she called us out to help her because they didn't really have the manpower.
They determined there was a possibility that the suspect may have had his map upside down. So anytime there is a tip or any new information from any source, we will investigate it to the fullest until that lead is exhausted, and we'll continue to do that until he's found.
The case received attention in 2019 when investigators and forensic students searched areas around Kincaid Lake State Park. The search was prompted by concerns that Evans' map may have been interpreted incorrectly during earlier searches. Cadaver dogs had also indicated the possible presence of human remains in the area. Despite extensive searching, no evidence conclusively linked to Randy was found.
It's been almost 39 years. My heart still aches.
The story is how total strangers have reached out to help a family in distress, as broken as you can imagine. You could be broken. Part of my prayer to God was, what's going to happen with Randy's situation when I leave and when my wife leaves? We're getting up in years. We've had some health issues. And what's going to happen? Who's going to remember Randy?
Even after 40 years, the family attended searches and remained hopeful that Randy's remains might finally be found. Witnesses describe Randy's parents becoming emotional during the 2019 search efforts, passing around photographs of Randy and sobbing as volunteers searched for evidence. Randy's younger brother, Tyron Cotton, died in 1990 at the age of 23. Family accounts and later reportings describe Tyron as deeply affected by his brother's disappearance. His mental and emotional health reportedly declined over time, with the unresolved case forming a persistent source of distress in his life. His death was later ruled a suicide after he jumped from the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge, I-471, into the Ohio River. His body was recovered several months later. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of this case is that his parents eventually came to believe he was dead. They later erected a headstone in his memory. But they have continued seeking answers about what happened on the night he vanished. An obituary published in 2023 states that John Elmer Cotton died February 3, 2023, at the age of 72. He was survived by his wife of 52 years, Wanda Cotton. Wanda became a prominent advocate of missing and exploited children after Randy disappeared in 1980. She helped organize efforts that contributed to the creation of broader missing children awareness programs and was involved in Kentucky's Exploited Children Help organization. On February 10, 2024, a profile for Randy Sellers was created on findagrave.com to serve as a digital memorial for the missing teen. At the time of this recording, Randy Sellers has been missing for 45 years, 10 months, and 2 days. Every passing day deepens the mystery, and after all this time, there is still no sign of Randy Sellers.
Viewer discretion is advised.
She owned a yellow V-neck sweater. Her hands were tied behind her back with red and white nylon rope. And she was, her head was...
In late February of 1983, two men entered the basement of an abandoned building on the 5600 block of Clemens Avenue in St. Louis, Missouri. They went in search for a scrap piece of metal to prop open the hood of their disabled car. Some reports suggest that the discovery was not made by two adults, but rather two teenage boys who were exploring the vacant property, as many neighborhood children were known to do. Using the weak flame of a lighter to cut through the darkness, the pair found themselves inside the furnace room. Whoever the two people were who made that horrifying discovery that day would be haunted by a scene for years to come. Positioned on her stomach was the body of a black female. Her hands were tied behind her and secured with a red and white rope. Her nails were painted a deep red. She wore nothing but a yellow V-neck sweater, now stained and heavy with blood. But the most horrifying detail lingered just beyond the trembling reach of their light. In one final, unspeakable act of brutality, she had been decapitated. Her head removed and taken from the body, leaving a scene so grotesque it felt inhuman. Captain Leroy Adkins commanded the Homicide Division when the case of the unidentified girl began, while Sergeant Herb Riley served as the lead investigator who worked tirelessly on the case until his retirement. Over the decades, the haunting unsolved case was also handled by other veteran homicide detectives in the city, including Sergeant Joe Burgoon. During the initial recovery of the body and the collecting of evidence, police assumed that the victim was a sex worker or a drug addict that was met by foul play. That was until the medical examiner turned her over, revealing that she was not an adult female, but a child between the ages of 9 and 12. The only article of clothing found on her was missing its manufacturing tag. Aside from the dust settled on the victim's skin and the garment itself, the item appeared to be in relatively good condition. Detectives found blood along the basement walls, evidence suggesting she had been killed someplace else and carried down to the basement. Additional droplets of blood were found on the floor near where she lay. The autopsy was performed within 1 to 2 days of her remains being found and was conducted by forensic scientist Mary Case. Mold was present on her neck wound and used to determine her actual time of death, which was found to have been 5 days before her initial discovery. Her exact height measurements are unknown due to notes from the autopsy not specifying how her measurements were conducted, with her height being estimated to be between 4 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 6 inches. Evidence on the body suggested the killer made 2 separate attempts to remove her head, with x-rays revealing 2 distinct cut marks in the cervical vertebrae. Examination of the neck bones indicated the use of a serrated blade, as microscopic tool impressions were consistent with a jagged cutting surface. A bacteria typically found in dried aged beef known as Thamnidium was discovered. It's possible the mold grew from bacteria present on the murder weapon. Along with the mold, traces of green paint were found. This was speculated to be from the handle of the murder weapon, or was transferred when the body was discarded inside the basement. Visible bruising was found on her neck, suggesting that she was likely strangled to death before decapitated. Since no hemorrhaging was found present on the body, this finding pointed to Jane Doe's likely cause of death. The body showed signs of post-mortem handling and significant blood loss. Any blood present or absent was interpreted through normal post-mortem processes. Her stomach was found to be empty, but her body had since been well nourished, suggesting that she had been well taken care of up to the point of her death. X-rays indicated no previous damage to bone structure and no signs of prior abuse. Hairs were found growing from the back of her neck and were saved as samples. Droplets of blood were found along her thighs and were determined to have been deposited prior to death. She had aspirated blood and swallowed a portion of it, suggesting that she may have suffered trauma to her head or facial area, likely the nose or mouth, causing her to inhale blood that later collected in her stomach during the post-mortem examination. This finding also helped explain the blood traces found on her legs. The most disturbing aspects of the autopsy was the confirmation that the child had been raped. Seminal evidence was identified in the groin area. However, in the 80s, DNA testing was not widely available, and the material was never really analyzed at the time. Forensic experts also recovered a white pubic hair believed to have originated from a male individual, which similarly went untested in the initial investigation. Years later, the hair was subjected to DNA analysis, but it yielded limited usable information. Ultimately, these constraints left police with narrow and incomplete forensic evidence to work with in uncovering her identity. Authorities accounted for every child residing within the metropolitan area. Missing person cases were checked, and no recent reports matched the unidentified victim. While this suggested she may not have been local, investigators cautioned against drawing that conclusion. The absence of a matching report didn't necessarily mean she had come from another state. It was entirely possible that she was from the area but had never been reported missing. Investigators went so far as expanding the search to Illinois, reviewing missing children reports in hopes of finding a match. No matches. Not a one. Complicating the investigation further were the poorly organized school records of the time, making it nearly impossible to determine whether Jane Doe had recently transferred into the area or had quietly disappeared after transferring to another state. Beyond the search for the child's killer, investigators also combed through the city's sewer system in a desperate attempt to locate her missing head. But despite their efforts, her head was never recovered and remains missing to this day. The media dubbed the missing child initially as Sweater Girl since she had been found only in that. It was eventually changed to Little Jane Doe and then St. Louis Jane Doe. Her body was kept in the morgue for 9 months with no one coming forward to identify or claim her. On December 2nd, 1983, a funeral was held for the girl in Washington Park Cemetery. The funeral was attended by law officials, a handful of media people, and the gravediggers being the pallbearers. Her body was placed in a small white casket. No immediate family members filled the funeral chairs as there were no immediate family members to fill them. The seats remained conspicuously bare. Her grave was initially unmarked until the owners of a monument business, Charles and Mary Schaefer, decided to donate a gravestone for her. This gesture was halted by the medical examiner explaining how it would be inappropriate. Their position ultimately shifted after the medical office received an anonymous letter from school children, questioning why they would be prohibited from contributing a stone. Confronted with the sincerity of the appeal, they reconsidered, and a memorial was created in May 1984. Her headstone read, "The saddened hearts were healed, and knowing the pain of life is over, and the beauty of the soul revealed." An empty slot was left in case her name was ever to be discovered. St. Louis Jane Doe's case went cold after some time, but not for lack of effort on part of the detectives. Every year on the day she was discovered, authorities put out an all-points bulletin, but received no credible tips. In 1990, Detective Joseph Burgoon, among the earliest officers to arrive at the scene following the discovery of her body, went on the Oprah Winfrey Show to discuss the St. Louis Jane Doe case.
In St. Louis, she was just Baby Jane, a faceless, nameless 9-year-old murder victim who lay in the county morgue for months, unclaimed and unloved. She was buried in a pauper's grave. That was 11 years ago, and police still don't know who she was or who killed her. To keep the case alive, Sightings offered the services of psychic Noreen Renair.
In 1993, the psychic show called Sightings contacted St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department to do an episode on the Jane Doe case.
Having produced hundreds of clues that have helped solve dozens of police cases, Noreen wanted to help. Using a process called psychometry, she is able to psychically experience the crime herself.
I get pictures. They're very disjointed pictures, images, sort of like
The show's psychic named Noreen Reiner requested that the police mail the sweater and rope for a reading.
Arranged for a phone meeting between Detectives Burgoon and Atkins in St. Louis and Noreen in Orlando, Florida. Assisted by hypnotist Walt Steeb, Noreen tries to put herself into the crime scene. She touches the rope found on the dead child and slowly begins to speak as if she were the young victim.
he's holding my hand. I feel like he's holding my left hand.
As Noreen moves deeper into her trance, she begins to experience what she believes is the physical and emotional pain of the child.
Okay, I need you to forget the pain, Noreen. Go beyond the pain.
My chest is hurting me. As I'm being strangled.
Noreen had no prior knowledge of the case. She was told only that the victim was a young female.
She said her vision revealed that a male teacher took Jane Doe, prompting police to create a sketch of that man. Rayner claimed to have mailed the items back to the police of St. Louis, and that she even had a receipt of doing so, which was reported to have been verified by a local Florida detective. Suspiciously, the items were never returned and are presumed to have been destroyed or lost during transit. Some have speculated that Reiner retained the items for personal possession. While some truly believe the items to be lost, some have speculated that Reiner retained the items for personal possession. Detective Burgoon stated that the items had been mailed in good faith, though he believed it ultimately reflected poor judgment and a critical procedural misstep. In his view, the evidence should have been retained for potential forensic testing, as fibers and possible DNA analysis could have been conducted had the items been preserved. The materials are unaccounted for, their whereabouts unknown. In October 1999, the apartment building on the 5600 block of Clemens Avenue, where Jane Doe was discovered, was demolished. The site now sits as an unsettling void, reduced to an open expanse of lawn, broken only by uneven patches of grass and exposed earth. Over the years, law enforcement received hundreds of tips, letters, and phone calls, yet each led to a dead end. Individuals occasionally came forward claiming to possess the victim's skull or known the actual location of where her remains could be obtained, but forensic testing disproved every assertion. In one instance, an informant told police that her head had been seen hanging from a tree in Waterloo, Illinois. But when police descended on the area, they found nothing. It was later determined that the informant had documented history of providing false information to law officials. In 2002, a woman named Sharon Knoll independently pursued the case for nearly a decade and spent $23,000 of her own funds. She claimed to know the identity of the killer, describing him as a drifter who had since relocated to Texas. She also collected DNA from a woman living at a Minnesota Native American reservation and asserted that Jane Doe was a Chippewa girl named Shannon Johnson. DNA testing later ruled out any connection, confirming that Jane Doe was in fact not Shannon Johnson. In 2013, St. Louis Jane Doe's body was scheduled to be exhumed from the Washington Park Cemetery for further testing. The Washington Park Cemetery was a burial site designated exclusively for black individuals due to segregation laws at the time. The cemetery had been in use for numerous burials since the 1980s. Over the years, many remains had been relocated because of land loss to the expansion of the nearby airport and the construction on I-70. The owner later came under investigation for serious mismanagement and improper reinterment practices. Reports indicated that bodies were being buried on top of one another, and in some cases, the deceased were placed at incorrect grave sites. The owner, whose name is undisclosed, reportedly committed suicide sometime later, though the true motivation remains unclear. When Jane Doe's burial site was descended upon by law enforcement, investigators discovered 3 bodies, none of which belonged to her. This forced them to reassess and determine where she had been relocated. Detective Burgoon assisted in the renewed search. Photos from her first funeral were reviewed in an attempt to pinpoint her possible location. Eventually, they focused on a specific section of the cemetery. At approximately 3 feet down, they uncovered a casket, though it was not Jane Doe. Determined to find her once and for all, they continued excavating. In a subsequent dig, they uncovered another casket, and at this time, just beneath the initial find, they found her. Her remains were used to create a DNA profile based on material from the 1980 autopsy. Bone samples were sent to the University of North Texas and the Smithsonian for isotope analysis. Results suggested that she may have lived in states such as Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Ohio. However, further testing pointed in the opposite direction, indicating possible ties to southern states like North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Mississippi, ultimately not narrowing the investigative search in any meaningful way. In February 2014, Jane Doe was laid to rest at Calvary Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri, within a special section known as Garden of Innocence, a designated burial ground for unidentified and abandoned children. Founded by Judge Rebecca Navarro, the organization provides names to children whose identities were never discovered, ensuring they are remembered with dignity rather than anonymity. It was here that Jane Doe was given the name Precious Hope. A funeral service was held for her, drawing a significantly larger attendance than the original burial. Law enforcement officers remained present, quietly monitoring for any suspicious individuals during the wake, as killers are sometimes known to attend their victims' funerals. Detective Joe Burgoon served as one of the pallbearers. For the service, she was dressed in a pink and white gown and placed in a newly prepared white casket adorned with gold angelic accents. Vernon Brown was suspected as a perpetrator in the Jane Doe case. In 1985, while living in St. Louis, he coerced a 9-year-old to his basement, where he raped and strangled her to death. He then disposed of her remains in black trash bags outside his home. In 1986, he raped and murdered a 19-year-old in her own apartment and left her body to be discovered by neighbors. It's not known where Brown resided in 83, however in 85 he lived a mere 4 miles from the abandoned building where Jane Doe's body was recovered. While Brown was in prison, police paid him a visit and questioned him about the murder of Jane Doe, but he had nothing to say, as he was unwilling to talk to investigators. Brown was later executed in 2005. Another person of interest was a man named Tommy Lynn Sells. He was responsible for the deaths of over 20 people. In July of 1983, 5 months after Jane Doe's body was found, he murdered a St. Louis woman along with her 3-year-old toddler. Several of his victims were between the ages of 10 and 12, similar to Jane Doe, who was around 9 years old when she was murdered. His methods were shooting, stabbing, or bludgeoning his victims. Records placed Sells in Arkansas in 1982, but it's unclear where he was at the start of 1983, although he was in fact in Missouri the same year Jane Doe was murdered. Detectives went down to Texas to question him. He confessed to killing an African-American female. However, Sells was known to confess to any crime he was asked about, making his account not credible. Sells would later be executed in 2014. In 2019, a cold case unit was made for Precious Hope, an entire room dedicated to her. Jane Doe, 1983, room 425. Detectives have recounted her case as one that will not let them sleep, a true nightmare. In 2022, the case later became the subject of an in-depth documentary directed by local filmmaker Edgar Bird Sosa. The film examines the mystery surrounding Jane Doe's death, bringing renewed attention to the case that has remained unsolved for decades. The documentary is available to stream on platforms such as Tubi and Apple TV. In the summer of 2023, a potential break in the case emerged from a post on Reddit titled "Trying to Find My Sister" from user_finding Janetta. In the post, the user made a public appeal while searching for their missing sister, sharing family history, photographs, and identifying details in hopes of locating her or learning what happened to her. As members of the online true crime and unidentified persons community reviewed the information, some noted possible similarities between the missing woman and the victim known as St. Louis Jane Doe. The discussion centered on comparing physical characteristics, timelines, and available records to determine whether the unidentified woman could be connected to the family. While posts generated interest and encouraged further examination of the case, no definitive identification was established through the Reddit discussion alone. The post highlighted the enduring impact of unresolved missing person cases and the role that online communities can play in bringing attention to long unsolved mysteries. The worst thing about it is that it turned out to be a hoax.
The day that she was found, February 28th of 1983, was just like today. It was cold, dismal, and gray. She was lying face down in this basement furnace room. She had on a yellow V-neck sweater. Her hands were tied behind her back with red and white nylon rope, and she was, her head was nowhere to be found. We thought she was an adult, but when we turned her over, we determined then that she was a child. The uniformed officers, juvenile division detectives, we were all up here. The news meeting was here. We tried to talk to all the neighbors to see if they had seen or heard anything. We thought this could be a missing child and we could find her, right away, but we didn't find anything.
The police have not given up on this case. The media have not given up on this case.
Obviously, somebody knows who she is. Somebody knows.
Someone should not pass from this world without their existence being acknowledged.
No one knows who killed St. Louis Jane Doe, and that uncertainty is what makes this case so disturbing. Her identity, even her name, were stripped away by a brutal attack. To this day, she has never been identified, and no verified record of her family, home, or the life she lived before that moment has ever surfaced. If her family is out there searching, I hope they are one day granted closure. But if those meant to protect her are the ones who tried to erase her existence, may the truth find its way to the light, no matter how dark it may seem.
You're thinking the poor little girl's over here all by herself, nobody cares. But there are people who cared. They didn't forget her.